Day two of free agency brought some clarity and a new signing for the Chicago Bulls. We're going to talk about what that clarity is and how the Bulls have set themselves now in a clear direction that nobody can really doubt. We're going to talk about all that plus a little bit of the mailbag right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. Let's get into it for today. So day two of free agency brought a signing that a lot of you guys pegged. I got to give you guys credit. I can't name all of you guys, so please don't charge that to my mind. But like a lot of you guys at the start of free agency mentioned Jalen Smith. And honestly, I thought that Jalen Smith may be out of the Bulls' price range, just depending on what they did with the roster. Well, the Bulls do end up signing Jalen Smith to a 3-year, $27 million deal. And what that did is that solidified, removed any questions that DeMar DeRozan is not returning to this team. And that's something that I did not expect the Chicago Bulls to outright do unless DeMar signed elsewhere first. But the Bulls send a clear message. They're clearly now unequivocally going younger with their roster, taking a really nice upside pick when it comes down to Jalen Smith, right? Jalen Smith is somebody who has shown an ability to produce at the NBA level already, but at only 24 years old has not nearly reached his ceiling as of yet. I've seen a lot of you guys question, okay, well, if Jalen Smith was, all that, why did he move around so much? And it starts with the fact that Phoenix, when he was drafted by Phoenix, they were in a very different place when they drafted him versus when they traded him. They were a team that all of a sudden became this team that was trying to compete. They were even made the finals, right? And so they moved him to Indiana. And then when you look at him coming to Indiana, he was always playing behind other players. And he's shown some flashes. I'm not going to act like Jalen Smith is all of a sudden this great prospect that's just going to turn into this amazing starting level center. The higher chances than not is he stays a quality backup center in this league. But the Bulls do get somebody that does have the chance of having a high reward for this team with a very low risk. You know exactly who Jalen Smith is already. And while he is not nearly the defender that Andre Drummond is, his offensive game is much more polished and versatile than what Andre Drummond is. And if you can't tell by the Bulls' moves, they're really focusing on offense here through what we've seen so far. But even with that, Jalen Smith isn't a slouch defensively. Well, on ball, sometimes he gets abused. But he is somebody who can rebound well. He can get some block shots. He's going to be able to run with this young team. All those things are really good signings. Then when you look at the deal, 3 years, $27 million, an average of $9 million per year, even though it starts at a little over $8 million. Jalen Smith is a really good signing by the Chicago Bulls team. And I would say this, as free agent signings, not trades or acquisitions, but of free agent signings, Jalen Smith is probably their best free agent signing since they signed the last backup center in Andre Drummond, right? So this is a really good signing by the Chicago Bulls. Now, I know some people are more pessimistic on it just because they question the output. But here's what I'll say. As of right now, Jalen Smith is going to be the backup center. He's going to be a depth piece. He also offers a more kind of natural fit next to Nikola Vucevic if the Bulls do want to go a double big lineup, even though at 6'10", 220 pounds, ESPN has not updated his measurements at all in years, basically since college. He did measure in at 6'10", 220 pounds at the draft combine. Considering he was drafted 4 years ago, I'm going to highly doubt that he's lost weight since then, right? So Jalen Smith is somebody who can come in, he can produce, he can shoot the three ball as well. You don't want to make him a three-point shooter, but he can shoot the three ball, and that's what I really like about this signing of Jalen Smith. This is one of the better signings that the Chicago Bulls have done in a while, and he still brings upside. And I asked a question about a month ago. In free agency, do Bulls fans want the Bulls to prioritize veterans that can contribute to winning now, or players that still have some upside that you may be able to uncover over the course of these deals? And a lot of you guys did say upside. This guy brings a combination of both. You know exactly who he can be at a baseline, but he still has potential to be a little bit more, and that's why I love this signing for Jalen Smith. Now, with that said, yesterday as well, we also got word from Chris Haize that the Chicago Bulls are looking to dump the salaries of Lonzo Ball and Zach LaVine. And this is no surprise here. The Bulls have some options here as far as Lonzo Ball. They can waive and stretch, which I don't think would be smart at this point. He expires at the end of the year. Why stretch his salary out over 3 years when you can just deal with it for this season and be done with it, right? So, but that is an option. They can reach a buyout with Lonzo Ball. I don't know if Lonzo is going to be incentivized to to give up too much in that buyout. But, there will be teams to take a shot at Zoe if he is bought out. And, maybe he can recoup some of that money if that's the case. But if the Bulls just want to get off Lonzo Ball's contracts, that's probably their best two options. Of course, trades are opportunity there, but I just don't see. Hell, the Bulls are having trouble trading Zach LaVine. I don't know if they can trade Lonzo Ball. If they can and get anything back, got to give them shout outs to that. And as far as Zach LaVine, the Zach LaVine trade saga is one that is just so interesting to watch where this has gone. It's gone a lot of different places, man. And ultimately, it sucks. It sucks that a player that still can be productive. A lot of kind of criticisms that have been thrown Zach LaVine, some that are just, but then like we see with a lot of players, once you start getting actual just criticisms, they start going too far left in a lot of ways. And Zach LaVine is still very much a player that can be productive. But that contract, I think, is the thing that's holding it back the most. It's just the contract of Zach LaVine. That's a lot to pay for a player that has the flaws that Zach LaVine does. Now, I've always maintained and said that I think that you're looking at Zach LaVine maybe in the second wave of free agency, but it's looking like maybe it's a trade deadline move. And you got to think about it this way, is that if a team does make a move for Zach LaVine more so towards the trade deadline, then you're looking at them not paying most of his salary for this season. They would then have a time to look at how their acquisitions or their players have developed since the offseason going into next season. And then maybe they are willing to take on a more risk if they feel like, hey, we're right there. Let's get this score that can help put us over the top. Like I said before, Zach LaVine, if he's your second or your third, that's especially if you can make him your third option, that means you have a really damn good solid team from top to bottom. So, we'll end up seeing what happens there. I think that there's a high probability that both these guys end up still being on the roster by opening day, but we'll see. And then DeMar DeRozan. When the Bulls signed Jalen Smith, they hard capped themselves. We'll get more into that when I get into the Bulls' current cap situation. I'll get into that in detail. So if you don't understand what hard cap means, just as a baseline, it basically means that the Bulls now cannot go over the first tax apron, even if they wanted to, which they don't. So we're not going to pay the luxury tax anyway. They just basically made it official. They removed the option for us to pay the luxury tax. So we are now hard capped. And so what that has meant is that DeMar DeRozan can't re-sign here unless he's willing to take an extreme pay cut. And the Bulls have limited sign and trade options, which we'll also talk about here in a second as well. But now the Lakers are rumored as one of the teams saying this. The Lakers sources said still hold an affinity for veteran scorer DeMar DeRozan after the Los Angeles Lakers finished as the runner-up for Klay Thompson. Now, how does that happen? DeMar DeRozan is now left with one of a very few options. One, of course, is that he can sign into a team's cap space if a team does have cap space to sign him and it's the money that he wants. He can sign for any team at the mid-level exception. That would be a considerable pay cut for DeMar DeRozan. And then it's a sign and trade with the Chicago Bulls. Now, the problem is that with hard capping themselves, the Bulls can't take more money back than they send out. And because of that, they can't go over that first tax, but they can't go into the luxury tax at all. So that has limited the Chicago Bulls at basically only being able to take about $12 million back in a sign and trade for DeMar DeRozan, which you're going to hopefully sign for more than that. And then I guess there's another option, maybe of a 3-team trade where maybe the Bulls can dump off another one of the assets, or it'll be a 3-team trade. So one of the larger contracts goes to a third team, whereas DeMar goes to a different one. The Bulls get something back. But the DeMar DeRozan has found himself in a position of power in a lot of ways. DeMar came into this offseason, well, theoretically going into this offseason, it almost got looked at as DeMar DeRozan, if the Bulls wanted to stay competitive, held the power. Once the Bulls decided to, no, we're fine, we're going to go younger, even if it costs losing games, we're willing to do that. That took the power out of DeMar DeRozan's hands. Now, it took away even further once the Bulls said, we're signing for the mid-level exception. We're going to go ahead and hard cap ourselves. We can't bring you back now. That now has removed even that for DeMar DeRozan. And like I said in yesterday's live stream, this is not an indictment or anything against DeMar DeRozan for who he is. DeMar came in and was the exact player that Chicago Bulls signed him to be. And yes, that is a flawed player, but it's the exact player that they signed him to be. He did that. He broke wilt records here, had some very, very good game-winning shots. There are times where we were in fourth quarters because of DeMar DeRozan's performance. He came in here and did everything that he needed to do. I said it before. He has earned another contract, but that doesn't mean he's going to get it, right? This is the NBA. Things change. And much like how it looked at the trade deadline for the Bulls, to where it looked like now things have drastically changed for the Chicago Bulls team. And that's where things sit at with DeMar DeRozan. Listen, DeMar isn't going to be a Bull next year. Now, the question is can the Bulls help him get to where he wants to go? And what do the Chicago Bulls get back in return for that? That's the question that you have to ask yourself here. And we'll see what happens, man. Overall, it's I'm sure a frustrating situation for DeMar and his agent. They're probably sitting back like, hey, it would have almost been better had the Bulls traded us at last year's trade deadline, where it's rumored that the Bulls could have gotten a first-round pick back. I mean, watching this DeMar DeRozan situation unfold is going to be interesting. It's going to be great to watch from the standpoint of just being a Bulls fan. Like, that's what it comes down to. And being a fan of the sport of basketball is watching how this thing unfolds. It's going to be one of the more interesting scenarios left in free agency. DeMar DeRozan is one of the better free agents left on the market. The question is, though, is how do you get him there for the money that he potentially wants to get signed for? This goes right back to the offseason where we signed DeMar DeRozan, in which he kind of got humbled by the offers he got out there, but then the Bulls came in there, offered him more, and then we got him, right? So it's going to be interesting to watch. But all it takes is one team to want to make the move, and things can get done. We'll see what happens there. But it's a big situation in which the Bulls, DeMar DeRozan may not get the compensation that he was hoping for coming into this free agency period. But with that said as well, let's go ahead and move on. I want to talk about where the Bulls sit at right now in free agency. I'm probably going to do this every day this whole week, is kind of talk about where the Bulls sit at until we get decisions made on some of the big ones. So yesterday the Bulls had 13 players under contract. The Bulls now have 14 players under contract, which means we only have one open roster spot for the Chicago Bulls. Now, that includes Zach LaVine, Lonzo Ball, and Ernelat Batum, who is not non-guaranteed. So theoretically, if the Bulls do need to create another spot, they can waive Batum to create that spot because he is a non-guaranteed deal. As I said before, the Bulls have now hard capped themselves by using a portion of their mid-level exception, which now means that the only things that the Bulls can use to add players to their team is the mid-level exception that they have left at $4.3 million and the biannual exception at $4.7 million. That's what they have left to add to this team if they're signing free agents. If it's trades, it's a little bit different. Signing trade options for DeMar DeRozan are still possible, but they're a little bit more limited because of that hard cap. And we have one open roster spot, which I already said, two possible if they waive Batum. We still have decisions pending on Lonzo Ball, Zach LaVine, even DeMar DeRozan, which I said. And then we have our own free agents in Javonte Green and Henry Drell, who's a two-way player there. So we have decisions to make on that. I still think as of right now, if the Bulls are not able to trade Zach LaVine, the most likely scenario is the Bulls are going to sign Javonte Green, and that is going to be their team. That's it. That's 15 spots. Now, the Bulls are going to wait to sign that last spot because they're going to continue trying to search for trades for Zach LaVine. And considering the size of his contract, it's a high probability that more than one player would have to come back, which then theoretically would take up your last roster spot. So yes, there is a scenario now with the moves that the Chicago Bulls have made that Javonte Green is not a Chicago Bull next season. We'll see what happens there. Then we have two open two-way spots left. Henry Drell is one of those. He's a two-way free agent. Andrew Funk is signed to a two-way deal. He's already locked in. And then we extended a qualifying offer to Adama Sanogo, who could end up on the actual roster, or he could end up back on a two-way contract. So that's the full contract situation for the Chicago Bulls. That's where we sit at. The only things that we can spend as far as spending power out in free agency, a little over $4 million left of the mid-level exception, a $4.7 million biannual exception, and the vet minimum. That's it. Now, if we are trading, that's a different prospect. So that's where the Bulls salary cap situation sits. But I want to spend some time looking back. And I was going to make this a bigger segment, but I just don't want to incur the PTSD that comes with it for myself or for Bulls fans. But when you look at this right now, this Bulls retool, rebuild, whatever you want to call it, was made harder by the Bulls not deciding to move on from prospects earlier. I always go back to 2 years ago at the trade deadline, the first year of Zach LaVine's new contract, when the Bulls were reportedly offered R.J. Barrett, some filler, and 2 first-round picks for Zach LaVine. Now, in no way am I saying that trade would have stopped where the Bulls are. They still would have naturally ended up here. R.J. Barrett is not fixing what was going on with the Bulls, but the difference is that you then would have a younger player in R.J. Barrett on a more cost-controlled contract, which you could dump. You also would have 2 more first-round picks added to your team, right, as far as assets. So that was the first kind of misstep by the Chicago Bulls. Now, that's not to say in anything that I talk about here, am I saying that all of these things would have happened, that the future would have turned out this exact way, or that the Bulls should have made all of these moves? I'm just more so looking at what the Bulls did not have now by some of the things that they gave up. Then you go to last year's trade deadline. Andre Drummond, the Philadelphia 76ers offered 2 second-round picks for Andre Drummond last year at the trade deadline. They end up getting him now in free agency for nothing, right? The Bulls get nothing for that. Now, 2 second-round picks aren't anything that's amazing, but what that does is gives you more assets if you wanted to trade. For example, the Bulls are having trouble trading Zach LaVine. Imagine if they had 2 extra seconds or a first or whatever it is to attach to that to then get off that contract. That can make it a little bit more, even though we're hearing that the Bulls are having trouble with that. But again, it adds more assets for you to have if you do need to make deals to throw in sweeteners. Of course, the Alex Caruso got reported that the Bulls got offered multiple first-round picks, none in 2025 draft, and then they got offered first-round picks in this draft. Those are, again, as you go younger, more bites at the apple. Now, I do like the fact that they got Josh Giddey, so take that for what you will, right? And then DeMar DeRozan. You would have gotten a first-round pick back for DeMar DeRozan, reportedly, had you moved him at the trade deadline. These are all reportedly. So right there, we're looking at 2 first-round picks potentially for Zach LaVine. That's 2. Another first-round pick for Alex Caruso. We'll go off the mean. Let's just say you got 1 for him. That's 3. Another first-round pick for potentially DeMar DeRozan, probably heavily protected. That's 4. 2 second-round picks for Andre Drummond. That's a total of 6 draft picks that the Bulls don't have because they hesitated to make moves on this roster earlier. And I'm sure if I wanted to get more in the weeds, we can get more in the weeds on that, right? And so ultimately, this is why future forecasting and vision is important by our front office. And I hope that AK starts learning that now through this lesson. I get it. This team showed great flashes, and there's a chance I understand why there's a hesitation to move off of it, especially when this team really did think that Lonzo Ball was still going to be able to come back. But you have now put yourself in a situation where you've lost pieces for nothing that you couldn't gotten something back for. DeMar DeRozan, you're likely not getting anything meaningful back for DeMar DeRozan. Zach LaVine, you're having trouble moving him. He may stay on the roster. Maybe that ends up being a better thing for you. But this front office has to get to showing vision. They have to. And if they don't, hey, this rebuild is going to end up right where this one is if you don't have vision. Let's hope that the Bulls do. Now, that was just a brief overview. I wanted to get way more in-depth and detailed on that, but like I said, I did not want to incur myself the PTSD, but we're looking at, seriously, a nice number of picks where the Bulls just hesitated. Now, who's to say this may work? Josh Giddey could hit his ceiling here, right? Mattis Bucilis, a great pick by the Chicago Bulls, one that I love, right? And that's where we get into our next topic. The Bulls' future is now taking shape. This is going to be a team that likes to get out in transition, play fast. They're going to be a solid rebounding team. Look at what the Bulls have rebounding-wise. And yes, Nikola Vucevic right now is going to be included in that. You have 2 extremely good rebounding guards in Josh Giddey and Kobe White out there, right? You have that. Patrick Williams, whether he starts at the 3 or 4, he hasn't been a great rebounder over the course of his NBA career, but he can get out and run, and he can also pass. Mattis Bucilis is also somebody who's a solid enough rebounder, really good passer, does like to get in transition, really good finisher. And Nikola Vucevic, who also is a player that is a really good defensive rebounder that can get you extra possessions to get out and run. He's just is going to have to be the trailer because he ain't running with you, right? You added Jalen Smith, another young guy who likes to get out and run and can run with you. You already got Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry. These players are players that like to play out in transition. And our fast breaks with Ayo Dosunmu leading them were beautiful to watch. This is a team that naturally, not through playing running gun. Running gun is different than playing with a high tempo. Running gun, you just run to run. High tempo means that you take advantage of turnovers, getting defensive rebounds to get out in transition before the defense can set up. That's what this team is. They also got players that like to play in the passing lanes. Josh Giddey can do that with this length. A very long team do the Chicago Bulls have as well now with this. And I like the way that this roster is going. The question is how competitive are the Chicago Bulls trying to be in next season? And that's something that we truly don't know. I've seen and I've talked to some people that think, hey, this Bulls team can still be a top 8 or 9 team in the East. With as much changes as we're having, I have to see it before I believe that. I'm not saying it's outside the realm of possibility, but I think that the Bulls still would be their best bet to maximize their 2025 pick, the chances to keep that, and then see who they can get in that draft, because that's where you can find a really good franchise-changing talent at as well. This Bulls team is off to a good start as far as a rebuild. They are. They still got some big things they need to decide on. Zach LaVine, Lonzo Ball being probably 1A, 1B, and then Nikola Vucevic. But like I've told you guys before, and I know C-Dub is going to hate to hear this, there's still a very high probability that Nikola Vucevic is on this team next year, and maybe you look to move him next year in the offseason as he'll be an expiring contract. That's my thought process, but you guys can let me know what you guys think down below. Before we go, we do have a voicemail I want to get into. This one is from Reginald.
Hey, this is Reginald from Columbus, Georgia. I like him signing Jalen Smith. When I saw him in Indiana after he got traded there by Phoenix, I was like, after like 3 or 4 games, yeah, he's good. He's like, the team sucked, and a lot of it was in like not garbage minutes, but in games where the team had already quit. And Jalen Smith was like, I'm gonna get these minutes, I'm gonna show what I could do, and I'm gonna get this contract. And when he became a free agent, I was like, it was like 2-3 years ago. I was like, come on, Chicago, do something, be smart, sign Jalen Smith, give him some minutes. You had him and Thad Young, and after you drive Devin Vassell, make it happen. But it is what it is. But right now, the Bulls only got like one roster spot left. And my question to you is, should the Bulls consider holding off on signing someone else, or would you probably make a run at like re-signing Javonte Green? Because at this point in time, I actually like most of the lineup. But I just like how it fits, how you make it work, how you distribute minutes. That's going to be a question. And as for Zach LaVine, I know a lot of us are just tired of all the trade talks with him. And that's why if I was Bulls management, I'd just shut it all down. Like, you know what? Zach tried trading you. No one wanted you. So screw it. You're going to start the season off probably playing small forward. You're going to average 24, 4, 4. You're not handling the ball at all. I don't want to see you dribbling the ball off your foot. This is what's going to happen. You're going to ball out for the first 2 months. Some other player going to get hurt on some other team, or a team's not going to live up to their own expectations. They're going to call us. We're going to make the deal. We're going to get like at least one first round back for you, and you're going to go to probably a playoff contending team. And as for Chicago, well, that'll just be that. But like I said, at this point in time, I think we should just think that the roster is set and just look forward to summer league and training camp. But thanks for hearing me out. Bye.
All right. Should the Bulls hold off on signing somewhere else? I kind of think they have to. One roster spot open. They have to hold off on somebody else, because then they remove the flexibility of even in a Zach LaVine trade, right? If you sign somebody else right now, that means that you can't take back more than one player for Zach LaVine. So I think they're going to leave that one roster spot open, and mainly because they probably feel confident that Javonte Green is going to be here if the Bulls do want to sign him. So I think that that's something that you're definitely looking at. They're not going to sign anybody else right now. They're going to try to continue to trade Zach LaVine, see what happens maybe after the first week of free agency. They're going to wait to see what they get back in a DeMar DeRozan signing trade. Can we include a Javon Carter in one of those trades? If we can do that, that also can open up some spots there for you. So, that's something that the Bulls do need to look at and should look at as well. But yeah, I think that we hold off on making any more signings. Now, I could be wrong. Hell, I could post this video and 2 hours later, like yesterday, the Bulls can make a signing. But I do think that higher probability than not, the Bulls are going to hold off on signing anybody for right now, because they only have one remaining roster spot. Now, if DeMar officially signs somewhere else, and then you have 2 remaining roster spots open, then maybe some things might change, right? So I think the DeMar or Zach decision, depending on which one of those happened first, if a Zach decision is even made, that decision may be made for us. That would determine how the Chicago Bulls attack the rest of free agency. But that's my thought process. Thank you for leaving that voicemail, Reginald. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.